Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I get to talk to Claude Riedel, a Minneapolis glass artist who creates Ner Tamids that hang in synagogues around the world. We talk about how he got started, his ongoing display at the Foci Minnesota Center for Glass Arts, and his brush with Hollywood fame on this week's Who the Folk podcast. Claude Riedel, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you, Lonnie. My pleasure.
So you are a glass artist that, among your other works, specializes, I guess would be the right word for it, in making Ner Tamids.
Yes, that is true. It's a niche, specialty which I stumbled into, but ended up devoting my, the vast majority of my artistic life to. So I feel very fortunate.
So how did you get it? Like you said, it is pretty niche field. How did you first find your way into that?
Well, I had been doing flat glass for a number of years, 10, 15 years or so, when I was, and had done a couple of Judaic pieces in the Twin Cities when I was invited by Bet Shalom, my congregation at the time, which was just moving from the Jewish Community Center to a new sanctuary in Hopkins to make the Ner Tamid. And I was honored and surprised and pleased. And it was, it was a great experience to do it. Part of what then changed the course of my life was that, that the response that people had to it was, as they would come to me and talk to me after services, was very emotional and very, appreciative of the effect that it had on their worship and on their experience in the sanctuary. And then another time, I sat in the darkened sanctuary after services and felt the presence of something greater than myself in that moment, sitting with the Ner Tamid. I was reminded of the powerful history of light and darkness in my own family, and I was reminded of how my grandfather was taken to Buchenwald on the night of in Kristallnacht, the night of shattered glass, and was rescued eventually by my mother in 1938, and he and his wife and my mother emigrated to Ecuador. But I found myself realizing, boy, to create light out of darkness was something, and to create wholeness out of something that was shattered, really, really resonated with who I am. And that in that moment, I decided and felt like this is what I'm called to do, and decided that this is what I'd commit my art life to doing, and I've done that ever since.
So you hadn't really thought about it in that sort of way until you had a chance to sort of sit with and sort of embrace what you had made for Bet Shalom.
So that's right. I mean, it really came to me like a lightning bolt, very deeply felt, and saying, well, here is a real way I can contribute to the Judaism, to feel like I belong, that I've done something of use, and that it's just, it's this coming together of all these different parts of my artistic part, my Judaic part, my loving glass part, into a whole. And I think that's what we all strive for as people, is to find ways to bring disparate parts of ourselves together in a meaningful way.
Oh, I think that's absolutely true. Were you doing Judaic work when you were doing flat glass, or were you just doing artistic glass panel type designs?
Yeah, it was mostly that. But just prior to it, I had done two pieces, one for Adath Yeshurun, for the women's group, a small tree of life enclosed in glass, and then a large scale project for B'nai Emet Synagogue, which unfortunately is no longer there because it's now a yeshiva. But both of those really exposed me to that part of myself, and really, awakened it, you might say, in some.
Sure. Well, part of the, interestingly, B'nai Emet is now part of Adath. Adath had
Really? I didn't.
absorbed it. Yes.
Okay, Adath Yeshurin.
Yes.
Okay, but what happened to the yeshiva?
The yeshiva moved in and is still there, but
Right.
the yeshiva had built on and expanded the synagogue building to create the dormitory space. But B'nai Emet had moved out of the space and became part of Adath.
Okay, that's news.
So
to me.
there is, as part of a display at Adath, by the stairs to the front office that people listening to this may have seen, there is some pieces from B'nai Emet that were moved over, and I believe there was some glass artwork that is part of that. So I wonder if that's a piece that you had created. Then I'll have to.
I wonder.
Next time I'm there, I might have to check that out. When you created the piece, the Ner Tamid for Bet Shalom. And I guess this goes to the broader question of when you create a piece for any synagogue, which you've done for synagogues around the world.
Yes.
What type of, what type of conversations are you having with either the clergy or a synagogue committee in terms of going about the design process on your end? How collaborative is it, or how much is it? Do they just turn the keys over to you and let you roll with your vision for it?
Well, I wish, but but it's really, and I say that somewhat tongue in cheek, because I really value the collaborative process, and most of the time I'm working with committees, and sometimes the rabbi is involved or has the final say on it. Sometimes the rabbi takes the lead and it's just between he and I, but most of the time it's working with an art committee, and I solicit from them I ask them, so spiritually or emotionally, what does the Ner Tamid mean to you, or what do you want it to evoke? And listen to those stories, and sometimes very personal and historical pieces come out, which sometimes, if I can, I try to add little touches of in the Ner Tamid itself, so people can say, "Oh, I influenced that element," or that reminds me of a parent, or whatever it might be. So, and at some point I do have to say, okay, thank you for the input, and now I need to take that and make it mine, make it, what I would create, right? You can have too much input too. I see that you recognize that.
No, I mean, there is such a thing as too many cooks in the kitchen.
Oh yes. So I've learned the art of that balance. And so, I must say, in another part of my life, I've also been a psychologist. So I think sometimes that might have helped me in my negotiation, navigating these moments, kinds of skills. But I've really had entirely positive experiences with people as I've worked through these processes. It's been wonderful.
Is it a challenge to make each one really unique to that particular congregation or the city, or something like the location that the synagogue is located in?
Well, yeah. There's a lot of parts to that. I mean, one part is I'm considering, as I said, what the people are describing, what would be meaningful to them. At the same time, I'm looking at the architecture, and trying to create something that fits size-wise, in terms of horizontal, vertical, certain kinds of concerns, color, other things that really fit with the synagogue, as well as the image that people have for it. It's really important to do that, because you don't want to come up with something that people will say, well, that's not what I thought was going to happen, or that looks like something else, but not this. And that's gone well, but I really try to consider all those factors. Sometimes I'm dealing with donors, with people who are dedicating to a parent, or for some other cause. But there's a little more just direct involvement of what would be meaningful to them. But most of the time, I really encourage them to not do it entirely alone, but to run it past the pastoral staff or committees as much as possible. So I don't know if that. So there's a lot of factors that are going into it. The other part is working with glass. Is that it's just about impossible for me to make two pieces the same, because I'm working with blown glass pieces that are never the same, just inherently. Which is a blessing.
Right.
So that's part of what I like the glass that we make. To create one piece, I might blow four pieces. To get one that's just right. And then often I find that some of those other pieces are just right for some other moment and setting. So if you see my workshop, I have quite the collection of pieces that, were the seconds on one hand, but become the firsts in another moment,
So where is your studio? Where do you work out of?
In my basement, actually, of my home.
Okay.
But when I say studio, what I mean is it's where I do a lot of the final putting together of the pieces, where I do all the stained glass piece, the fusing, work. But the glass blowing itself is not in my studio. That's in a separate studio. And I've worked all these years with Foci, the Minnesota Center for Glass Arts, and particularly with Michael Boyd, who was for the first 20 some years was the main person I worked with, a wonderful human being and very creative influence in my journey. And so I also then work with a metal worker that somehow makes the steel frames that underlie the delicate glass that you don't notice but are really crucial. Or I have a bronze maker that helps me with the parts that are bronze. So I have a photographer that's a professional that's taken many of the photos from my book, that's recorded, through all these years, my pieces. So I have a crew, of people that have just been wonderfully devoted, and part of what's special in that is that when people get, sort of touch, in a sense, the creation of a Ner Tamid, they universally feel like they've touched or done something or contributed to something holy. And so there's a reference there, in their relationship with me, their appreciation for being part of this, and their lives. So, so that's there's so many sort of blessings in the making of these that have to do with how people experience, respond, contribute, but anyway, I'm very grateful to be able to do this.
So much like it can be a team effort to design the piece, it's also a team effort in the putting it together. You have a group of people that work with you.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, the team effort, in the designing comes from the committee or the individuals I'm speaking with at the synagogue, and the team effort in creating the parts of the design that we come up with, is with these wonderful craftspeople. So that's been a great blessing, to work on both parts. So, just to say, so sometimes people will ask me, right out front, well, how long is this going to take, to make this, and I have to say I'll say something like maybe 2 months to 6 months, depending on how the design process goes with the committee,
right?
And how much back and forth there is there, but also on the time frames of the glass blowers and the welders and the bronze people, and how I can fit into their schedule, because it isn't all, they're not at my behest entirely in their work. So that there's a journey of the parts coming together. That's,
How many people are globally are doing this sort of work, the creating of Ner Tamid?
Well, I what I like to say, and if you look on the internet, this is what you find. I'm the only person that does it exclusively.
Whoa.
In the world. So a certain claim to fame there.
That's some rarefied air.
It is. That's why I called it a niche. But
You weren't kidding.
No. But the rest of the story is that there are, a fair number of people who make them intentionally, but it usually is a sideline for them in their artistic efforts, because there are the larger synagogue projects, having to do with designing the sanctuary, or doing the stained glass windows, or creating our own, are larger projects that most people seek out. And I've been lucky to be in a position where I haven't needed to do that, and that I could just specialize in the way that I have. And that's worked very well for me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's so, I guess, what have you gleaned in 25 plus years of doing this? What have you sort of learned that helps you, as you go from designing one to the next?
Well, one thing people will sometimes ask me, how do you, what's it like to do that? As sort of, as you're saying, and do you feel pressure or worried or whatever? And one of my experiences is that basically, if in creating a piece, I can sit with it, I can sit in its presence in that darkened room in my own workshop, sit in its presence and feel something, feel moved in some special way, that my soul is touched. I trust that others will be, moved in a similar way. And so I don't really worry, that, if you want to say it that way, or about how it will be received. Of course, it's always a delight to hear people's responses and to be present for that whenever I can be. But it's I trust my sensibilities, and that of and as we go, and not every direction I try works out, of course, but then I look at it, or I consider or share it with others, and we go a little bit different way, or so there's a lot of movement there. But in the end, I need to be able to sit with it myself.
You mentioned Foci, the Minnesota Glass Art Center, and you have an exhibition that is there, ongoing. It started the end of January. It runs through March 27th. Tell me a little bit about what the exhibition is and how that all came together.
Well, I'm really grateful to the Minnesota Center for Glass Arts for inviting me. I've been working with Foci, through Michael Boyd and other glass artists there for almost 30 years now, even before it moved to its current location. And they invited me more than a year ago, because they have to plan ahead, to do this show, and it was I was just surprised and really pleased, and I felt like also on their behalf it made a lot of sense to promote people that were not just were strictly glass blowers, but people who were using blowing glass in their artwork, and so I thought it was a wonderful decision on their part. And the show itself has 10 Ner Tamids hanging, 6 larger ones, 4 smaller ones, and they're at a nice height. They're not sometimes necessarily as high as they might be in a normal sanctuary, but they're higher than they would be if I was at a convention, right? Where there's an 8-foot limit, so you can walk under them easily and see the bottoms. One of the things I say to people is, when they're looking at my work, that I'm thinking about them from 2 levels. I'm thinking about them from the sanctuary view, which is almost somewhat eye level, but slightly above eye level, where you're seeing the purity and the clear glass for the most part, and purity of the light itself, the flame. But then when they come up on the bima and look up at it, there's a secondary experience that often creates an aha or a real emotional response as they see how the light is it's different from what they've known, that they even realized was there. It's a surprise, and it radiates out into the space, into the universe in a different way. So I'm really pleased with how the show looks. There's another wall that has photos of the Ner Tamids in sanctuaries around the United States, around the world. And I thought that was a really important thing to do, so people aren't seeing them just in this, neutral, abstract way, but really seeing the variety of sanctuaries and the beauty of the sanctuaries in which these pieces are fitting. There's another display, and we can talk more about this if you'd like to. That's about one piece that I made that has some Holocaust significance, and anyway, there's a lot more to say about that, but that and then there's a display of my book that's available for purchase. There's also a TV screen with flashing, a large number of, showing a large number of my my pieces, and it includes some video clips of a TV show that one of my pieces was on.
All right. I was going to ask you about that, but we're going to save your brush with Hollywood for a sec. Just put it aside for one quick second.
Your show. Go ahead.
No, totally fine. You've teased out the topic perfectly. Yes. But I did want to ask you, you mentioned the piece that had a little more significance or connection to the Holocaust. And obviously, in a lot of ways, your personal story, your father's survivorship story, right, does connect a lot to the Holocaust because of the connection to Kristallnacht, right, and you putting glass together now. Mm-hmm. How did so tell me a little bit about the story of this particular Ner Tamid and right, the connection that it has for you.
Right. Well, this is one of the most meaningful pieces I've ever done, and I had. It all started when I was doing a presentation for Ramon, which is the Jewish Arts Council in Minnesota, in their Pachachka event. That's their annual fundraiser, and it's a delightful experience, and where we show a number of slides. And after that, the Ruth and Walter Elias approached me and told me the story of how they had collected this barbed wire while they were visiting the Hasag labor camps in Czechoslovakia. And while they were there, their guide cut off several strips of barbed wire from the fencing around the concentration camp or the labor camp, where Ruth's parents had interred. And they brought this wire back, and it had it for a couple of years, feeling like it was precious and uncertain of what to do with it. But after hearing my presentation, they said, that's it. This is what's meant to happen with it. We're going to ask him to create a Ner Tamid with this wire. So they approached me after the show, and we talked about it, and I said, oh my God, yes. Well, this, as you said, touches my family history, brings me to tears. I'd be honored to find a way to do this. And so I did. Interestingly, they soon after that, they were on a return visit to Poland and Czechoslovakia looking for family history. And I asked them to bring back photos of that might be useful in the creation of it. But while they were gone, I just made it. And it just, I just got some things came together. I got inspired, and one of you'll see, if you get a chance to look at the piece, one of the things that was of significance to me was that while I wanted to use the wire, I didn't want it to be a dramatic, in the dramatic forefront or the, dominate the piece.
Right.
So it is subtly in the chain link. I created long chain links to hold the wire. So while it's there, what your eyes go to is the bottom glass that actually is black, representing the idea of the light, from darkness to light, coming up through the center flame, with the wire incidentally reminding us of that time, but not dominating the experience. And so it was very, very meaningful for me to create that. And we did it without a synagogue in mind, just simply because it was there, it was meant to be made. And eventually, after several years of exploring, we found the Bethel Hebrew congregation in Alexandria, Virginia, a very old congregation with many Holocaust survivor congregants or families of those congregants, as its home, and a wonderful experience delivering and installing it there. So I'm very pleased with its home and with the journey, that it took. So
that's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's such a great story. So in a case like that, it was a couple from Minnesota who gave you the piece, and it was created. But I had sort of thought that the end of the story was going to be that it was for a synagogue locally here, or for some other usage of familial connection for that couple. It's interesting that it ended up out east, not in this community.
Well, there were a couple. There aren't that many available spots.
Fair enough.
In terms of hey, we need a Ner Tamid, at this moment, kinds of opportunities. So yeah, we certainly invited some synagogues to consider it, but it wasn't possible.
People who listen to this may have seen your work locally already and not realized it,
right,
if they're members at Bet Shalom and Shir Tikvah.
Right, and Temple Israel.
Temple Israel as well.
Not the main one, but in the Dinard Memorial Chapel.
Oh yeah,
I made the Ner Tamid.
Okay,
this is the place that many people have had religious events and ceremonies and whatever memorials there, and but that was installed about 5 years ago. So it's relatively new in terms of the history of that beautiful chapel.
Oh yeah.
So that was very sweet. The Hillel has an air as my
okay.
So that's a
place of study, places of worship across denominations.
Right.
Have are purchasing your work, which is amazing.
Yeah, very much across denominations.
And since you mentioned your book, tell me a little bit about. I know you can get it at the exhibit at the Minnesota Glass Arts Center, but tell me a little bit about your book and how it came together.
Yeah, you can get it at the exhibit or on my website, and it's a book that started as my effort to just collect a history of my work, sort of for my family. But the more I got into it, the more I realized that this was really an opportunity to tell my life story, and how that fits with the making of Ner Tamids, and how the two kind of came together. And so it turned into a very personal and expressive and kind of lyrical story that is both about the history of the Ner Tamid, my history, and some photos of the pieces that I've made. So, and it's called From Darkness into Light, Claude Riedel and the Art of the Ner Tamid. And I have to put a plug in here for my collaborator, my dear collaborator, with whom I never could have pulled this off, Tara Rothi, worked with me tirelessly over the last couple of years doing this. So thanks to her.
It looks gorgeous. It's a nice coffee table style book.
Yes.
Big hardcover. So yes, we will have links to your website and the exhibit as well, where people can get more information for both of those things. So, all right. So we got the heavy stuff out of the way. Now we can talk about Fear the Walking Dead. How did you come to create a Ner Tamid for a hit TV show a few years ago?
Well, it still is going. There's season 6 going.
No,
on right
I
now.
mean the episode was a few.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Of course.
No, the episode, right?
Yeah.
The episode was a few
Yeah.
years ago. The show is obviously still rolling on, but
and just for your viewers, so they can watch the show in its entirety, it's season 5, episode 12, and lo and behold, it's entitled Ner Tamid. Okay, so. And because the hero or the focal point of the show is that, so they found me on the internet, and apparently the Ner Tamid that was in the sanctuary that they were using for the show wasn't interesting enough to them, or wasn't what they were envisioning, and so I rented my Ner Tamid to them for the show.
Okay.
They sent it back. They had it come back a second time for reshoots or whatever. And it was all very secretive. They wouldn't, I said, well, can you send me still photos of, on the set or when you're using it, or how it might, how it, no. So I knew nothing about how it was actually going to look or be used until it actually showed up on the show. We had a viewing party in our home, which was just delightful, where 30 people, and every time the Ner Tamid came on the show, everybody cheered, and it was
the highlight of the show was an inanimate object for you.
Yes. Yes. But the show was meaningful they're titling it Ner Tamid because they're trying to, and they did this with a number of different religions, trying to show how the Judaic, religion and beliefs, would deal with an apocalyptic kind of setting, and how do you hold the faith, so to speak,
right,
under those conditions. So parts of it, and it was a very intentionally educational about Judaic practice and belief. And then there were there were the zombies. That was the other part of the show.
But that's, of course, the other piece of it is the zombies. But
right. Right.
Your Ner Tamid made the show. It's
so if you want to come see my installation, my exhibit, the piece is there.
Oh, it's part of the exhibit.
Fame is on exhibit. So
that's excellent. So have they, since the show aired, obviously it's been a couple years since it aired now, were they able to send you like still pictures of it in you? Oh,
best pictures I have to take off the TV.
Yeah, I was going to say we'll have to watch it and do a screen grab for
That's
you.
What I did. Yeah, and we have some videos on the exhibit, so people say, "What's going on there?" Ooh, yeah. So it's fun.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, it's amazing who finds you.
Right. Well, the internet is a wonderful thing sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah. So I've been found, from many different walks of life and parts of the world, and part of the joy of doing this are these moments, are these experiences with people from all different walks of life, all different kinds of sanctuaries and situations and needs. And I should say that as often as I can, I try to personally deliver and install the Ner Tamid.
Okay.
Doesn't always work out because of finances or the size of the sanctuary, synagogue, but whenever I can, I hand deliver it in my luggage and to protect it, and the effect of that is to meet the people that I've been perhaps conversing with for the last 6 months,
sure,
and who've had this great investment in the creation of this most meaningful ceremonial piece. And so that's just delightful, because it's kind of completes the experience of my delivering this creation, this baby, this and turning it over. And I really love to do that. So
all right, well, Claude, thank you so much for your time. Before we let you go, though, last 2 questions and we'll get you on your way. First, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Sukkot.
How come?
One of the things I love about Judaism is its orientation to the seasons, to natural seasons in nature. And Sukkot, for me, after the high holidays, is a wonderful time of resting, of gathering the harvest, so to speak, and being together with family. And so I'd start there.
That's an excellent place to start. That's for sure. And what is your favorite Jewish food?
Matzo ball soup. I specialize in matzo ball soup.
So your matzo ball soup.
My mother's and now my matzo ball soup. Yes, it's in high demand.
You can't go wrong with homemade like that. Well, Claude Riedel, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about your art. It is fascinating and beautiful, and we will have links again for everybody to your website, to the Glass Art Center, where people can learn more about your work and see some of your pieces if they haven't seen them already throughout town. But thank you so much for joining me. It was a real treat.
Lonnie, it was my pleasure. And I hope to see you at the exhibit.
The Who the Folk podcast is part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network, a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.